Well, Addison fucking killed it as Lady Gaga from when she performed Paparazzi at the VMAs. We've all seen it. I haven't even opened TikTok since I saw that image because I knew I would just be like flooded by takes, and my brain didn't have the space for anything other my just like shock, horror, and deep feeling of personal pride. And then she also went as Kate Moss, also looked amazing. I've said this many times, but one of the extraordinary things about Addison is how well she can embody so many classic women of our time. I'm like the Addison Cleopatra when, you know. The other thing outside of her Halloween costumes is that Addison's dancing again. Just the other day, she posted the first like full choreography video that she's posted, to my knowledge, in a long time. Certainly many months, maybe close to a year of her in the studio. And, you know, in comparison to when dancing for us was her main modality, she's so much more distant and obscured to us now, right? She's kind of gone through this process of like concealment, and she feels much edgier and just harder to reach, right? That eagerness and that kind of cheerleader quality that so characterized her first couple years in the spotlight is really all gone. And what has remained is her incredible control of her body. And that's why she looks so good in all of these different shoots, and why anytime she moves on camera, it's just like mesmerizing. But she's growing up and she's evolving, and I pity anyone who ever doubted her. You know, in comparison where she felt just like always too available to us, now I think we have developed a craving for this type of original Addison content that feels like a throwback and just it feels like a treat. So I want to thank her for that. What else happened while I couldn't get my shit together to record? Audrey Gelman had a baby. Her name is Vivian. She was born a couple weeks ago now. I didn't even know that Audrey was pregnant. I guess she had kept that pretty under wraps, though I don't really keep the closest of tabs on her. But anyways, congratulations to Audrey. Glad the baby's healthy. And Vivian is like, just happens to be one of my favorite names. So amazing taste. Emrata is in her bitch era. I first became aware of this from a TikTok that she posted on September 30th, in which she's talking about the movie Blonde, that new adaptation of the Joyce Carol Oates book. It's kind of a fictionalized biography of Marilyn Monroe starring Ana de Armas. It came out, almost a couple months ago now? I just watched it the other week and I actually was very moved by it. But anyways, in this TikTok where Emily Ratajkowski is announcing her bitch era, she was talking about the movie Blonde, which I don't believe that she had seen, but she had been made aware that there was lots of criticism floating around that it's just yet another example of men fetishizing female pain. And Emily's like not surprised, and talking about how she feels like in her career as a means of self-protection and also commercial success, she's learned how to like fetishize her own pain. And she's like, I figured out a way to like, you know, use it to my advantage. Like I knew it was kind of sexy and I'm kind of like this fucked up girl, blah, 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 blah. She's like, but you know, it's kind of hard to fetishize anger. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm officially in my bitch era. I'm like an angry woman or something. So yeah, that's kind of an interesting logical conclusion to come to. Sorry, I'm not trying to be like sassy or like, but I just feel like there's like ample historical evidence and near historical evidence that being an angry woman is often completely backfires in the project to subvert misogyny. So the bitch era is upon us, apparently. Interesting, because the past 2 years or so have been this pop culture project of reclaiming bimbo, right? With all of the Anna Nicole Smith and Pamela Anderson and even like Britney kind of rejoicing. Anyways, I'm wondering if bitch is kind of due for its project. Although I do feel like bitch kind of had that reclamation era in the like early to mid 2010s. I feel like when I was in college, in my like feminist theory class, we would be reading a lot of these pop political theory books, and they were all really obsessed with bitch and cunt take back, and even just like bitch media. Whatever. Anyways, this is what Emily's on about currently. She also has a podcast. The first episode airs this coming week, November 1st, I believe. So we'll have to check back in about that next time. The podcast is called High Low, and we do have to talk about the album art for her podcast, which is super weird, but I think to read in the most generous light is kind of actually coming full circle back to her Robin Thicke era with like tousled hair and just the red font and the way her makeup's done. It's really giving the blurred lines vibe to me. So if you go to the Instagram that she posted on October 12th, yeah, and the leather jacket and the mic stand, it's so weird. And then the second picture, all in a day's work. Anyways, we'll just have to keep an eye on that. And her starting a podcast is not surprising, right? It's actually kind of the next logical step in her project. I think of Emily Ratajkowski as someone who's never quite satisfied with her either amount of power or even just kind of like, or not even power so much, but station in culture. And so she's always trying to come at it from a different angle and kind of like get a new team on board or something. Or I don't even know. Okay, maybe she's just ambitious and she's just like always trying to challenge herself. That is certainly admirable. So anyways, whatever. We'll listen and we'll check back in. Cool. What else? Oh, well, Sydney has like announced being in a ton of movies. She's going to remake Barbarella, that Jane Fonda movie from the 60s, which I actually just watched after she announced it. I had been meaning to for years and just finally did. It seems to me that the point of that movie is just a bunch of beautiful images of women in distress. And Sydney looks so good in distress. So I think it's going to be great. Yeah. And then she's in a couple others. I guess we saw that first look of her in Madame Web, where she's looking just extremely dowdy. Almost looks like a 40-year-old librarian. I've mentioned in my episode on her, like they can make her look like extraordinarily plain, which I guess versatility is a gift, but I think everyone seemed collectively like, what a disgrace to see her in like kind of muted strawberry blonde hair and glasses and like a grandpa cardigan and a button up. That's not anyone's ideal way to view her, but whatever. Oh, and then this happened so long ago also, but Grimes' plastic surgery, like right after I posted the episode, then she had posted that bandaged up photo and everyone thought she got elf ears, and then it looks like she's just got filler and a facelift. One thing that I didn't really go into in the Grimes conversation was I was reading an essay that I had written in 2020, and I felt like that was a time that there was still some tension around her public image, and I maybe didn't totally interrogate like the since then conversation, which is, at least to me, I think she's really devolved into caricature. There's not a lot of like interesting things happening with her as a character. So I don't know. The plastic surgery just definitely feels like a little, or I don't know. Everything, I think it all feels a little blown out and they're like too on the nose for this project. We're not really feeling like the crazy whim of her anymore. It's kind of like, oh yeah, this is the next thing that we'd expect this person to do, which is fine, but just I'm saying like narratively speaking, less compelling. Okay, I think that's all. I'm really excited about this episode. Today we're going to talk about Julia Fox. Julia was someone who was always on my short list of Stargirls to do, but I felt like people are just kind of sick of hearing about her. Like we're so inundated with images of her that are constantly trying to one up each other, and they've all kind of lost shock value or like interest. But then I ended up coming right back being like, I think we can tackle it. High level, Julia Fox is an actress and model, at least according to Wikipedia. That's her title, but that does kind of undercut her eminence and, at least within the past year, kind of ubiquity. She feels like Julia Fox kind of feels like an idea more than any one job. Also up top, she's 5'8" and she has like a sturdy frame. Like she has in the past year lost a ton of weight. I think we're all kind of aware of this like complete shift in her appearance from, let's say, this time 2021 to now. But she's definitely not in the teeny tiny woman category. Like she has broad shoulders and big boobs and hips and an ass and big thighs. Like she has always been very fit, even when she was heavier. She's very well built. Like she kind of has perfect shapes, regardless of how her weight fluctuates. But anyways, yeah, she has like an essence of like sturdiness and power and sex, I would say. She has kind of dark brown hair. She has green eyes. She has massive eyes, massive just facial features in general, huge lips. And she has a face that is, to me, just like extraordinarily beautiful. It feels like something that could have been carved out of stone like millions of years ago and has somehow like made it through to today. I don't know. It feels like something from like long ago or something. Her biggest breakthrough was Uncut Gems, the Safdie brothers film that came out in 2019. We'll talk about that. But there's a lot of Julia Fox lore that exists before this and is now kind of well known because I think, level 1 is kind of like Julia Fox, Uncut Gems, and what followed. Level 2 is like, oh, but what you didn't know that came before Uncut Gems. I think that, there's a lot of kind of well-known lore about her now that we're all vaguely familiar with, just in terms of her past as a sex worker, the art books she's produced, and her just kind of her youth in late 2000s and 2010s in the downtown scene. So we'll get into all of that. But I guess before we do the full deep dive, it's important to know just kind of where she is in her PR cycle right now. So I would say, generally speaking, in 2022, it's fair to say that Julia Fox is kind of a meme of herself. At least that's how she like is existing in the public's consciousness. And, just with so many things, with like all of her eye makeup, all of her different like DIY leather and denim and Hanes tank top skirt set looks and all of her sound bites, most of which came out of that Call Her Daddy episode that she did, and various like snippets from interviews on the red carpet. There's all these kind of just sounds and images and looks of hers that are just kind of mass circulated all the time, that it's kind of like an empty reference or something, or like feels, or I don't know what the right phrase is, but like it feels like some sort of circular reasoning where it doesn't really ever point to a source. They're just kind of like all bouncing around in our mind, and like nothing else that she comes out with really is striking or even feels that separate from anything else that she like has just done the weeks before, even as it appears to continually try to up its own ante. So I think that has been the case for most of 2022. That said, it's important for us to remember that this whole era that I just described has only been in existence for the past 10 months, right? So remember that it was New Year's Eve on 2022 when she did the first Kanye date, right? And then she like wrote it up for Interview Magazine, where they saw slave play and then went to Carbone, and she was just photographed like running around with him. And, that was kind of the kickoff for this whole new chapter. And so right, at first that shift was shocking. It was shocking how much weight she had lost. It was shocking just like that new level of celebrity, because obviously she had achieved a degree of mass culture success with Uncut Gems and like in the interim years following that. But then when she's hanging out with Kanye and there's just a million more eyes on her, and she started really kind of provoking the pop culture line of sight. And anyways, so that's been happening, but it all lost its power pretty quickly, as I said. Or just important to keep in mind how relatively short that period of time has been in comparison to her decade plus of being a girl about town, making shit and being talked about. So also, I guess important to note that I don't know how narrow my perspective of the collective eye roll is. I feel like people that I know are bored of seeing pictures of her or hearing about her, but there's certainly like an enormous contingent that just like sees her as this like amazing icon and is like, die hard for her. I don't know. It was just like, it's Halloween weekend, right? And so tons of people were her for Halloween. She posted a ton, probably like over 100 of people that were dressed up as her for Halloween. Well, for the longest time, her Instagram bio was a New York classic and it was like in that old English font. It's since been changed. I think of her as for sure a New York classic, and that's the like grounded position we come to before we dig in deeper. Okay, so Julia Fox, let's start at the beginning. Julia was born in Milan in 1990 to an American father and an Italian mother. She lived the first couple of years in Italy with her mom, but then she moved to New York, and she was raised by her dad. So she's born in 1990, so she's 32 now. She grew up in Yorkville, which is a neighborhood in Manhattan, just like east of the Upper East Side. Oh, and one thing I just want to say is that when last summer, when that kind of tell-all podcast by Rachel Amandi, I think the podcast is called The Cutting Room Floor, came out about Leandra Medine, who is the founder of Man Repeller, the now defunct kind of quirky girl fashion lifestyle website. Anyways, when this kind of tell-all came out about Leandra, one of the big things that people were on about was, oh my gosh, like Leandra had the audacity to make the distinction that she grew up in Yorkville, not the Upper East Side. Like, it's the same fucking thing. She's a rich girl, blah, 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 blah. And then, like, when we have a character like Julia Fox, who's so adamantly like, I grew up in Yorkville, like, it's not questioned, you know. It's just like, oh fuck, okay, she's from Yorkville. Like, I don't know. And it's just funny where people want to jump in and like split hairs and whatever. So yeah, so she grew up in New York and she went to high school in New York. There's a lot of different information about her high school years. Wikipedia formally says that she went to City as School, which is a like alternative public high school in like Greenwich area. I was just reading about it. Some notable alumni include Asa Akira, Princess Nokia, and Ryder Ripps. But then in the interview that she did with Naomi Fry in the New Yorker, maybe about a year ago now, she references going to like 6 different high schools. And then in the Call Her Daddy episode, she talks about having gone to high school in the East Village. So, you know, I think the general takeaway is she had a youth of little supervision, kind of running wild in New York. It was one big playground. She's like just trying to get by. She started partying really young. She says that she started going out to clubs when she was like 14 and experimenting with drugs and sex and etc. And yeah, I'll talk more about that in a second. But anyways, that's kind of the backdrop of her youth. She also worked as a dominatrix when she was in high school, sometime between 16 and 18. So her like later years of high school. So we'll put that at like 2006 to 2008-ish. And she's talked about this a lot, and it certainly informs a lot of like her look and the politics she espouses and the kind of cultural alignments she makes today. She worked in the basement of this commercial building in Chelsea, and she says that it was mostly like fantasy role play. There's a quote where she's like, no nudity, no penetration. But she's talked a lot about this work being her first experience acting. And so yeah, she's hustling from a young age. She's like out there as a really young girl. She actually did this recent shoot and interview for Paper Mag where she went back to this building where she used to work, and they photographed her in like each of the different rooms. The interviews between her and Kat Marnell, and she's kind of talking about reflecting on her experience and the different themes of these rooms and the roles that she would play and like what that was kind of brought out of her. It's shot by her friend Richie Shazam and styled by her friend, I don't know, it's Brianna and Delore. Julia works with her friends a lot and for many, many years. It's like amazing once you start, you know, paying attention to who she's posting on Instagram or doing like any very light research, like Google searches about her. And you just like see the same people again and again and again that she's worked with. And yeah, she's kind of loyalty over everything with her friends. So like sex work discourse has become pretty mainstream in the past 5 years, but Julia predated the public comfortability / like interest in this conversation and lifestyle and aesthetics, at least to my knowledge, at least at like the kind of basic Brooklyn girl who is interested in Rachel Rabbit White and Charlotte Shane. This is before cultural references to some grade of sex work, like Kat on Euphoria starts camming, way before OnlyFans and all of this. So the whole space can feel pretty tired now, I guess. And it can be annoying, I think, because all these girls with like college degrees are now like, I don't even know. Anyways, I'm just saying that like at first blush, it can kind of seem like Julia is like hopping on this ready-made trend for her or something. But I think there actually is a more complicated dynamic where this is like ready available for her to play into now. And she has experience from a time where it was like a whole different rodeo, or at least we believe it to be so. But I don't know if a point cohered out of all of that, but just some things I was thinking about. I mean, outside of this, she had a really hard partying youth, which I think looms in public imagination and is a big part of what she represents, even now being well beyond that, being a mom, being sober now. But like I said, she started partying really young and just experimenting with drugs. She actually OD'd when she was 17, which she's talked about. But I think in general, it's just kind of this recklessness and little to no supervision, lots of drugs and sex and excitement and like community of other young, highly energized, highly reckless people who all take care of each other. The way it functions in public imagination, there's a lot of glamour and just cred, I guess, that comes with our imagination of this type of lifestyle at this age. So Julia was 18 in 2008. So like, public record holds this as the like height of indie sleaze. And I just wanted to note, like, that's not quite Julia. There's nothing like Tumblr-y about what we know of Julia at this time. Like The Strokes, Guy Fieri. No, it doesn't seem like she seems like closer to like a Young Money groupie or something. I think one thing that feels like it stands out is that it doesn't seem like Julia was online at this time. She was like in the streets. She was like really, really living hard. And it doesn't seem like there was kind of this meta narrative of her life and her experience happening online. To talk to the dream that she represents, which to me feels very located in her being young and reckless in New York, as I said. We haven't talked about anything she's done or created yet. Her being her is kind of the crux of the myth of Julia Fox and the power of Julia Fox and the narrative endurance of her, which is interesting. But everything that she has done or created or become a representative of seems to me to be informed by this time in her life and by how real and hard her youth was, or at least has been like rendered to us in fragments. I guess I would say like the dream she represents is like young, hot, down and out in New York. And there is a massive body of work around this phenomenon throughout the ages. Literally, like at any point in history, there's going to be a chronicle of what were like the youngest and most wild people doing in New York. And there's like always going to be this feeling of that time being just out of reach, or like you were just too late to it, you know? Anyways, and I think that these chronicles happen for like every subculture or scene. They can be like popified or like just this inter-scene stories that get passed down or something. But I even feel like Allison Roman, even though that's like the G-rated and people who are like 20 years older version, the Friendsgiving vibe, like it still kind of is the same sentiment of finding a community of like-minded people who take care of each other, even though they like don't have their shit together in a variety of ways. Anyways, this is all to say that people will always be interested in what young people are up to in New York City. And this is like a fable and a dream and like a vision that like so many of us have. Anyways, to speak to Julia specifically, I think she in many regards falls into the specific lineage of like 1990s and 2000s this even as it literally predated her. The difficult to talk about because it's so talked about, kind of most cited example would be the movie Kids by Larry Clark. So this came out in 1995 and it's depicting high schoolers just drinking, experimenting with drugs and sex, and the backdrop of it is like AIDS and multiple characters are HIV positive, and it's this whole portrait of unsupervised, invincible feeling young people. This movie and so many similar depictions of youth in New York function on one level as kind of a cautionary tale. But then I think what's more powerful and therefore like disturbing about them is that actually their function is to arouse this longing that so many people have, basically of being cool. Level one to that is just this feeling of like ultimate freedom, of danger and boundary seeking and no supervision, just the invincibility of youth, I think. I keep coming back to these fables of youth, even like Euphoria, right? For anybody, I think, who felt particularly like charged and just like coursing with adrenaline and experimenting and like fucking up and just like getting into scary, sketchy situations and then just like getting out of them. It's powerful to be transported back to, I guess. Anyway, so there's that first just general like freedom of youth part. Two, I think that it's powerful to witness, because it's a dream that many people have, to be part of something that comes to epitomize the time in which you live. And I think that if it managed to feel like it captured a time, we're gonna have this attached to the characters that were at the center of something and that were so full of life that demanded them being depicted, I guess, if that makes sense. Okay, it's basically just describing like anyone at the center of the zeitgeist is inherently interesting. So stupid. Anyways, okay, so again, like in 1995, Julia was 5. So, right, it was like 10 to 15 years after that she's like coming into her wild and crazy, late teens, young adult life. So she's not a contemporary of those kids, right? I think she's like 15 years younger than Chloe, 70, but she can fit into that lineage in a lot of ways, kind of general timeline, subject matter, and just all of the downstream aesthetics that were kind of laid out. Even before I had seen kids, like I just like had known somehow that Rosario Dawson was discovered on her stoop by Larry Clark and Harmony Korine, who wrote Kids, right? And so that's kind of like analogous to, Julia's part in Uncut Gems, which was written for her by Josh Safdie, right? So this idea that you can emanate something so strong and essential to a time or a milieu that people with a vision can't help but animate you, that's powerful, and will always be something that I think, I don't know, like everyone wants that, Yeah. So I guess I think I bring this all up because I just think that her proximity and the ease with which she can be folded into an aesthetic world and a time period and there's an image of what young people in New York meant at this time. And Julia fits into that really well. And I think that just gives her a lot of narrative endurance. She basically has like infinity runway because of this time in her life, right? Like there's this like built-in voyeurism for her because she was there, right? So even today, she can like bring us back to that part of herself. And, I think were it not for like a lot of that, she would just like, she wouldn't continue to be interesting to us. So as I mentioned, and as is well known by now, she had early artistic career completely separate of her acting career. So she published 2 art books. Now she's like into her 20s. The first of which she self-published in 2015. So she was 25. It's called Symptomatic of a Relationship Gone Sour, Heartburn, Nausea. And it's currently out of stock. It's a mix of photos, notes, and other kind of artifacts. Like there's like a lost girl or like a runaway girl sign of her. Just this kind of portrait of self-destructive behavior. So drugs, bad relationships. I mean, I obviously haven't seen the full book because it's like I wouldn't be able to buy it. But from what I've seen online, it's like, yeah, pretty gruesome. Lots of pictures of her like all tied up or just like, yeah. The cover is actually of her shooting up. So please don't look at it if it will make you upset. The next year, 2016, she came out with another book called PTSD, which I did find. It's selling for about $2,000 on Amazon. It's kind of similar vibes. Lots, if not all of it, actually, I'm not sure, was shot in Louisiana. She had moved to New Orleans for a little bit. This one was actually explicitly described by one critic as it's like Madonna's sex book if it had been shot by Larry Clark. There's more kind of like explicit or both interrogations of like power and how it manifests in sexual relationships. And then she also did a photo exhibit called PTSD with some of these images that showed in a gallery that no longer exists on Canal. Okay, I have to share this like really random thing with you guys. I'm pretty sure this is like a porn reposting site. I'm so sorry. It is called drunkenstepfather.com. But there is an article on its blog called Julia Fox's self-published edgy porn art of the day. And there's some rendered images of these couple of books. Yeah, it is pretty graphic. So whatever, use your discretion. But I need to read to you a couple paragraphs from this because it's so hilarious. Okay. Julia Fox has published a few books that feature her quote-unquote raw artwork, I guess. You may not know who Julia Fox is, but she's from the Adam Sandler movie he's a jeweler in. Oh, I forgot to say, this blog post came out in 2020. So this guy is like digging through, figuring out like, who is this girl? You may be surprised that these were put out there by her, but it's on some Harmony Korine, Terry Richardson, Nan Golden, Sam Taylor Wood, Larry Clark, ... You get what I'm saying. And I don't mean to be name dropping art photographers like I care, ... I just lived with an art photographer in the 90s and had to jerk off to all their photo art books for lack of access to porn. Point being, ... I think this shit is great, nostalgic, brings back fond memories of a simpler time when this kind of thing was shocking, exciting, new, and not put out there for likes and follows. Solid fucking job, girl. Even if it's as contrived as all those other artists I mentioned earlier in the post, it's still good stuff. The weak load on her back, all right, ... The shooting up, ... Not cool to me, but overall, this is a win. So I think that's a pretty good review. Anyways. Okay, and then she also had, so those were her books. And then she also had a gallery show called R.I.P. Julia Fox, which she did in 2017. So here she was kind of exploring like kind of sadistic ritual death, like interest in like death drive and what are the like kind of sacrificial parameters or like, you know, potentials of that, I guess. Is featuring like her own blood on silk. Yeah. There's this article that was in HuffPost actually when this exhibition was up. She says here, I kind of consider myself as an anti-it girl. I don't really care about being seen. I want the things that I create to outshine the person that I am perceived to be, which I think is often not accurate and not really representative of who I am. So I don't know. For some reason, that quote to me just felt like, oh, this almost feels like a different girl talking than the girl that we like hear now. Like it's very like, there's this interest in like distance, I guess. And obviously now we're in a point where, you know, Julia is like always feeding us images of herself and talking directly to us. And I was just kind of struck by like, I don't know, the poise of it, I guess. The other thing in that interview is she talks about how she views her life as like a collection of crazy experiences. And I think that certainly kind of comes through when we look back at Julia, where it actually does just seem like these are the kind of like Grimes, what I like felt in her early years, where it's like, oh, whatever she's up to just seems like the natural manifestation of like her living her life and just like what's just coming out of her collection of random crazy experiences. It didn't feel like a plan she was executing on. Obviously, there's no way to know. This is part of the whole myth of it, which I've said a million times, that we have this like distance. It feels so like we can't quite grasp who she was. And that's part of what makes it so compelling, I guess. Thanks so much for listening. If you like what you heard and want to hear the rest of this episode and gain access to much more exclusive content, please subscribe to the Stargirl Patreon. It's patreon.com/stargirlpod. It's also linked in the description box below. Other ways to support the show include following and giving us a 5-star rating and leaving us a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. This stuff goes a long way to helping me spread the good word. So thanks so much for listening and for your support, and I will talk to you soon. All right, bye.